Hey everybody, this is Dr. Carmen Bryant. This is Car Chronicles. But we're talking about the conference this weekend. How you guys doing? You feeling all right? All right, let's do this. So you guys know y'all got the conference coming up this weekend. And so those of you that are Pacific Standard Time, it starts at July 29th, which is Saturday. The ticket sales end on July 27th, which is Thursday, which is tomorrow. So I don't know when you're going to get the video because I got to get head counted. So my assistant has to get the names and everything so we know who's coming in the room. Ticket sales end tomorrow. So those of you that want to come, email me or just go to overcomingnarcissistabuse.ticketleap.com. Go ahead and purchase your ticket for the online Zoom conference. And we're going to be talking about generational trauma, intergenerational trauma. We're going to be talking about sexual assaults, how you may have been violated in your childhood, how you think, things that have happened to you, how it affects your body, spiritually, psychologically, medically, physiologically. And we have a medical personnel that's going to be with us, is going to be talking about that. My friend Bridget Griffin, who is a domestic violence advocate for the First Choice program in Seattle, she talks about, she sees it all the time in the court system, how people are, especially women, are re-victimized. Judges, lawyers, and how the perpetrator re-traumatizes these women, and, how they, sometimes they can't be quiet. So they're in there and they're trying to defend themselves and they get themselves in trouble. Or that reactive abuse where they retaliate, they retaliate or get back at the abuser, or it's not retaliate, it's react to the abuse and end up going to jail. So she advocates for women. She advocates for those that have been in this situation. But let me tell you something. I'm going to give you something for free. Something I don't know whether I'm going to talk about at the conference or not, but let me give you something for free. Come here. Let me tell you something real quick. You guys always want to know my business. So let me tell you my business. Okay. So some of you guys wondering, what is my ethnicity? So I'm African American. My mother is German. She is European. She is of Czechoslovakian, German, French descent. Bohemian, from the Bohemia area. My mother's gorgeous. Father's African American, Southern boy. I grew up in Germany. So when I grew up in Germany in the 70s, at that particular time, the Berlin Wall was still up. So the wall was still up. And in Germany, there were a lot of Turkish Africans in that country, but the wall was still up. And it was still post-World War II Germany, where a lot of the Germans were still very prejudiced, were very racist. They still had a lot of isms and whatever. And my grandfather, who was German himself, he is actually a German Jew, from a lineage of German Jewish, was in the German military, had to keep that a secret, so no one knew. That's something they didn't talk about. So when I grew up in Germany, I grew up around a lot of the post-World War II elders that still had a problem with Jewish, Black, Turkish, any other culture, whatever. My grandparents were a little, the R word, the acist, yes, they were. I guess I was kind of tolerated because I was the firstborn and I came out very pale. So it was easier to swallow because I didn't come out a brown baby. So for them in their mind, I grew a little afro, so I had a little afro. But, so I think it was more tolerable for them because it just wasn't like pow, right in your face, and they asked my mother, is she really Black? My mother, yes, she is. But I grew up in that era where my grandfather, who was very, very Caucasian, very, very white, the retired German officer, very white, bald right here, and his name was Herr Friedrich Wilhelm Kaiser. His name was Herr Friedrich Wilhelm Kaiser, Herr Kaiser. Always an officer, always a gentleman. That's what they used to call him all the time. And he was a officer at heart. He was a gentleman, a pure gentleman. That was my first love. That was the first man I've ever grew in love with. But I used to go with my grandfather places. So we used to go, on the train. You guys that have been to Germany or are from Germany know, most of the transportation, bicycle, train, trolleys, subway, and that's how we travel. But people used to always stare at us because, you know, he's walking around with this little kid with a little afro, you know, and she looks different and she has brown eyes. The average German over there had blue eyes, and so they're looking at me. I've got these big brown eyes and just afro, you know, so they're looking at me. So as I grew up in Germany, it was always a matter of, you know, where'd you get those brown eyes from, you know, and so listen, now y'all look at me. I was called a black gorilla. I was called a black ape, a schwarze Affe. I was called a schwarze Affe. I was called a Mischling. And Mischling, which is mixling, like mixed up, is actually a derogatory term in Germany. I was called a Mischling. I was called a zebra, and so I was called schwarze Kaffee, black coffee. I was called a schwarze Affe, a black ape. Now look at me, y'all. If I was an ape, I was probably an albino ape, an albino gorilla. Look at me. You know, so I'm thinking, what in the world? But, you know, this is how I grew up. So I was traumatized as a little kid. And when I came to the United States, you know, I grew up in the DOD schools. I grew up, you know, I spoke proper English. I spoke very proper, articulated my words, you know, enunciated, and, you know, got down to the South and, you know, learned to speak English at 5, came back, kind of forgot how to speak the Bayerisch Sprach, the German, the Bavarian speech. Bavarian language, because it's very southern, very different. Had to learn how to speak the Hochdeutsch, the High German, with my grandmother. I understood most of what she was saying, but I couldn't speak the Bayerisch anymore. And so came back to the States when I was probably about 12, you know, and grew up down in the South. And so I was in the South, and just imagine the shock, you know, from going from being called a black ape, a zebra, a Mischling, confused, you know, all this black coffee, you know, then all of a sudden I was too black to be white and too white to be black. I spoke too proper, you know, I thought I was white. I needed to put a perm in my hair, you know, you think you all that, you know, because of how I looked. So I was traumatized. I was confused because I was too white to be black, too black to be white. So I was confused. I was traumatized. You know, I just grew up, and y'all, it's going to be hard to believe for those of you that served with me in the military. You know, so I tried to be more black, and, you know, in my mind, blackness being hood, you know, talking Southern, even got a gold tooth. So you guys know this is a fake tooth that I have in here. I had a gold tooth and everything, you know, trying to be hood. I tried to blend in with my folks. And then I had a problem because the dark skinned girls hated me, and they abused me, and so I grew up, and it wasn't that I was afraid of the dark skinned women. I just automatically assumed that all dark skinned women hated me. All dark-skinned women hated me. And that's what I thought, because that's how I grew up. And then I thought all Caucasian people expected me to look a certain way. I wasn't allowed to wear twists and braids and everything. I had to slick my hair back to give myself this, because I kind of look Hispanic, you know, so most people think I'm Latina. And so I tried to have this look to make me look other than what I was. I was afraid to tell people that I was black, because either way it went, I was being abused. And finally, one day, I just decided, you know, I'm going to take this gold tooth out of my mouth, because I began to realize that I was intelligent. I was always in front of people, speaking, teaching, you know, and I was articulate, you know, funny, found out I was funny. But I took the gold tooth out. I just began to embrace myself. And one day I decided, I said, you know what? I'm going to embrace who I am. And this is when my mother came into my life, Apostle Helen Sadler. And, you know, it sounds weird to say this. Some of you may understand, those of you that are multicultural, biracial. I'm multicultural. I'm African-American and multicultural. But for someone to come, and she's a brown lady, you know, she's a brown woman. And this brown woman embraced me like I was her own child, adopted me. And what she did was she put the key in the lock and opened the door up to allow me to embrace my blackness. I sound black. You know, it may look a certain way, but as soon as you talk to me, you already know what I am. So there's no confusion. But she allowed me to embrace who I was and told me I was beautiful the way I was. And she allowed me to that generational trauma, that intergenerational trauma, the trauma I experienced, you know, I was allowed to be myself. I was free, because she had allowed me to be black. She allowed me to be what I am in the first place. So So you guys need to be at the conference, overcomingnarcissistabuse.ticketleap.com, so you can hear more. Be there or be square.